Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be having another look at cyclamens. We had a look on Monday at painting a cyclamen and I said I would come back and talk a bit more about the actual drawing of the flower. So that's what we're going to do today. So when we're drawing anything, and it's always a good idea, we've heard this said with writing, you should write about what you know, and it's also a good thing with art really. If you draw subjects that you're familiar with, you'll find you're better at them. So familiarise yourself with a subject before you start drawing it. And if you enjoy gardening and if you enjoy plants and flowers are your thing, you will be familiar with them. But it's always worth taking another look, because even things that we see every day, we make assumptions about them and we don't always properly train our eyes to look. So I got this little cyclamen at the shop this week. Now I drew it, you know, from the side looking at the whole plant, but today we're going to just look at one of the flowers. So I'm actually going to take one off and have a bit of a closer look at it. So I'll take this one off, and they come out quite easily because, you know, as they get to the stage where they're going to be fading, they pull out much easier. So that's one thing you can see when they're ready for going. And there's loads more buds to come in there as well. So it's not going to harm it at all taking that one off to have a closer look. So have a look at how they're made. So if we look on here, first of all, you'll see there's some buds coming there, and the way that they're all curled up. And I spoke about this the other day, because they've been curled up so tightly in this bud, when they come out we tend to get all these curls and curves. So look carefully at those, and actually some of the leaves are very curled over as well. So that's something that's going to make it, your drawing, characteristically a cyclamen and not another flower. So look underneath, they all come from this circular shape here, and see how many petals there are. There are actually five petals, and they've all, without exception, they've all got these curved edges. So that's something to, you know, to really make sure that you get in your drawing, is getting that turned over curl there and the way they overlap and things. And very, very strong stem, which is attached. So look how they're attached, look how they're made up. Take them in pieces if you want to. You know, you can see how they're attached there at the back. And then something else that's very distinctive is the colour. Whichever colour cyclamen that you get, you tend to have this deeper colour at the base here before it goes up. So it might be worth having a try with different colours. But for the sake of today, we're just going to draw, and I'm actually going to pop my plant now in front of me, because it's much easier to draw one of those ones that's standing up right there. So from that angle, the angle that we're drawing it, this line here actually, although we know it's a circle, it looks very straight across. It's got a tiny, tiny little bit of a stamen or something coming out, but you really can't see that very much at all. So actually, I'm going to put my pen away for the minute. I'm going to start with pencil, just to make sure that we get it absolutely right before we start. In fact, I will do this one rather than one that's up there. Just imagine that it's standing up. So start with this line here, and we'll do it a lot bigger than it is on there. And we'll start a little bit down. And then this line here, pretty much a zigzag. So a nice big curl, and make sure you get a nice sweeping movement of a curl. You might find you over exaggerate slightly, which I do with my curves. That's nice to get that curling, because that's getting the feel for that particular flower. And you can't see the edge there because this petal is interrupting it. So then we'll start and put this petal in, follow it up to here, and actually you can see a tiny bit of it behind here, and then it comes, and it's quite a pointed tip there. So because we've made it a lot bigger, I'm hoping it's going to be easier for you to see. So now the next petal, we can see the curl of it there where it's bent over. You might not be able to see it actually from the angle that you're looking at, but I can see that there. Around, and again a nice sweeping curl down to the base there. And we've got, so here we're seeing, perhaps you're not, you're probably just seeing this side, but I can see this side, this line here. And then this petal, completely off on its own, and look where it lines up, you know, look where it's in line with this one to gauge how far you're going to go up with that line. And if it isn't perfect, if your measurements aren't completely perfect, don't worry, because that's too narrow there, can you see? That's too narrow. But I'm not going to worry, I'm not going to mess about changing it, because the person who's going to look at your drawing later on is not going to have this cyclamen in front of them to say, oh, well, she's got that measurement a little bit wrong, she, sorry. You know, they've not got this in front of them. They're just going to see your finished picture, so don't obsess about the measurements there. You would need to if it was somebody's nose, because then, you know, it might look completely wrong. But when it's a flower, something natural like this, you're really not going to have to worry too much. I'm just looking, I can see the inside of that. That's wrong now. It's because I've moved my head, I can't actually see the inside of that really. So when you're drawing, keep yourself in the same position. I thought that was slightly different there because I'd moved my head slightly, and I could see more of the underside. But I can't. So look now, so the stem's coming out there. So obviously then we need to remove this line. Okay, so that's got your shape of your cyclamen flower. Now we'll just look at the leaves. They're quite sort of heart shaped really, and I'll just put one coming out to the side. Again, nobody's going to know if you have copied that exact leaf. It's just that it has to look like a cyclamen and not a rose or anything else. So just get your basic shapes right. Get the characteristics of that individual plant. So the characteristics is it really dips down here. Obviously the stem's going from there, and you could pop that in. So I'm now going to go over this with pen just so that you can see a bit more clearly where these lines are meeting, and then I'm going to look at getting some of the tones in. Now these petals are transparent, so the light's going to shine through, and the petals are going to cast shadows on themselves, especially where they're curled over. By drawing one petal at a time and looking at where that petal joins up with everything else, stops you getting confused too much with your lines and which line belongs to which petal. So the pen I'm using here, it's a medium Faber-Castell Pitt pen, the ones that I've been using quite a lot recently because I bought a full packet of them, and I find that they show up really well on the videos for you to see, which is important for it to show up. And of course they're good to go over with watercolours because they're water resistant. So this is a medium size, which I think is probably the same one that I used when I did the actual drawing that I did on Monday that we painted. If you haven't seen that video, I'll pop the link to that one up here. I have done quite a few videos on flowers because I do like drawing and painting flowers. I think we all do really, because they're naturally so beautiful, aren't they? And I have a playlist of flower tutorials and demonstrations if you want to take a look at that. But if there are some flowers that I haven't done that you would really like me to try and have a go at, then just, you know, ask and I'll do that. So I'm going to get a slightly smaller pen now, a fine one. I'm going to look at some of the tones where the overlapping. So if we just bring him back and look where the petals are casting shadows on themselves and on each other. So I'll start with this back one, and this is actually the back one in here, and it's actually, now that I'm looking carefully, I'm going to have to get my other pen back because I've missed a line. It's actually curving over slightly on itself. So this part of it is quite dark in shadow, and then the light is on this part, so I'm going to leave that completely light. The edges of the petal, where they're slightly curved or slightly tinted, are a little bit darker, so I'm just going to give it a little bit of an edge. And then here, it's a bit of a vein, and again a little bit of an edge to it. So you can see I'm just using slight cross hatching, just a little tiny line to get some shadow in there. Now if we look down here, this petal is casting a shadow and this one is curved over, so all of this along here is making a shadow, and it's quite a distinctive line, but I don't want to draw a line. I don't want to draw a solid line like I've got there, because we're just putting shadows in now, we're not putting the edges of the petals in. And again it's slightly curved round here, and that's casting a shadow as well. This needs to be slightly wider. Now how you make your shadows with your pen work is up to you. What I suggest you could do at some stage, I'll just do it over here, is do a full sketchbook, a full page, get your ruler and mark it out into little squares. So you've got a full page of squares. Obviously I'm just doing it rough here. And in each one have a go at doing something different that you might use for shading. So just your cross hatch lines, some shorter lines, some dots, maybe some circles, maybe some more crosses. Just do a full page of using different dots and dashes and ways of filling it in that you might use in a drawing to make your shadows. So that's a good little practice, and it's a good reference to go back to as well. So we've got all the shadow more or less on this one that I wanted to, and I'm just going to put very faintly, so not pressing much on my pen now, I'm just very lightly touching my pen. Some of these, I can see some of these little veins in the petal there, and doing them in the direction of where the petal's going. So I'm going to move over to this one and compare the shadows now to each other. So the back of this is darker than here, but not as dark as here. So I don't want it that dark, but I want it darker than that. And I also want to keep that shape. So first of all, I'll put the edge on like we had before on the other part of it. It's got quite a distinct edge here. We'll do that afterwards actually, because that's part of the bottom half of it. And I like to just use lines, but like I say, you have a go with dots and dashes and cross hatching, whatever you think that you're going to need to get those shadows in. Now it's got a slightly light patch there, so we're going to leave that. And then this bottom half in here, again, you might not be able to see just the same as I do, you're looking at a slightly different angle, but this part of the petal is casting a shadow on that, so this needs to be a bit darker than this. So I'm just going to very lightly put an extra layer over the top. Okay, and I'm going to move down. And like I say, this is quite a distinctive edge here, quite a sharp shadow on there, and here going down. But then it's quite light in between. We've got a line down here. A lot of these shadows are cast by the petals on themselves where they're curving. And where that red colour is at the bottom, I'm going to make that a lot darker and bring that up into the, to make this a lot darker at the base. Just to give us that impression that we've got a complete change down there. Now here it's much more in shadow because it's got a shadow cast from the one above, so similar to this sort of shape here. So again, I'm not putting a line down here, I'm just stopping as I get up to where I want that line to be, stopping with those short lines, and here it's quite dark as well. And then again, like I did up here, putting some of those veins in the direction that that petal's going. So that's all one petal there. So we've done the two, and then we're going to move on to this one. I haven't yet rubbed out the pencil lines, but you could do that at any time really. So we've got a very distinct shadow all the way down, cast by this. So this is very light, except for in here because it's got a shadow off this one. The rest of it's very light. Bit of a curl coming across here. But it's casting a shadow all the way down. Actually goes slightly further out than that. So keep your lines moving in the direction of the petals. Quite dark under here. So as well as looking at where your shadows are, look at where the highlights are and where you really don't want to be putting shadows on. Now this shadow goes down here and then they cross over. So you've got one shadow going in this direction and one in this direction, which obviously makes this area darker because you've got one on top of each other. And again we'll come in and pop one or two of those directional lines where those veins are. And again, we've not done this top edge where it's quite a bit darker. And again, that red colour that's going up there, we're going to just do that a lot darker. And then moving on to this one. It's always difficult for me because I've got the camera there. I'm sorry, I lost a little bit of video there because my camera was full. That's a mistake of mine. So I'm not entirely sure where I was up to with my talking. But one thing I was saying was that when I'm drawing for the video, I can't keep moving my page around because I don't want, my arm to be in the way of where the camera is and things. But when you're at home doing this, and you're finding it difficult to get the angle of any of your lines when you're shading, move your paper around to make life easier for yourself. Okay, so I'm hoping I've not lost too much of that video. I won't be able to tell until I get that on the computer and have a proper look. So let's hope that I've not lost too much of it and it all makes sense to you. So again, going in the direction that things are growing always makes it look a bit more natural. And it won't look natural if you don't have any shadows, because we're not like that. We cast shadows. Okay, and one or two of those veins again in that direction, and then this part here much darker where the other one is casting a shadow from above. Now if we look at the stem itself, that's in shade there where the flower's casting a shadow on it, and then most of the shade is down this one side. We do a few lines going, you know, across as well as vertically to get that shape. And it has some little dots in it actually. And if you look, I don't know if you can see on the camera, it's quite pinky in places. When they're actually growing, a lot of plants, if you don't know what colour they're going to be before they start flowering, look at the colour of the leaves and the stems. If they're very, very green and there's not a hint of pink in, you're more than likely going to have a white flower. Whereas with the pink and red flowers, you're going to have that little bit of coloration in the leaf and the stem. Okay, so we could go on and do the same thing with the leaf. And if we look, it's actually, I've drawn that wrong, it should be like that. And again, there, you can just see the underside of that leaf. And the same thing, because they're quite curly, they're casting shadows on themselves. It's quite difficult with a leaf to see the difference between the shadows and actually where it's just darker green, because it is quite a dark green in places. But try and think not in terms of colour, but in terms of light and dark. And it's much darker in the centre here. And again, keep those lines, although they're just lines indicating shadow, keep them going in the direction of the way the plant's growing. And it's actually quite light on the top of this leaf, it's getting light from above. So I think that's probably enough. Just get one or two little lines indicating some of those veins and shapes there. Okay, so I'm actually going to pop a little bit of colour on this now with some pencil, because it's a shame not to with such pretty flowers. But before I do that, I'm just going to rub out the original pencil lines. So I just have this tin on the side of old crayons that the children have had in the past, and you know, mismatched ones, and you can actually find some nice colours in here sometimes. So I'm going to have a look at that. That's a lovely sort of a baby pink, that's a Crayola one, and then we need something a little bit darker for the base. Again, another Crayola one that says red, so we'll give those two a try. We could do with some green as well, couldn't we? I'll just get a green one. So I don't want to put a lot of colour on here, it's just to, you know, get that. So the thing about this is we've already got that shadow there now. We've done all that with our drawing. So now that we're putting the colour on, we can actually just colour it in and not worry. Unless we want to leave some white paper for a highlight here and there, which we can do where it's the very lightest. So on the back of here it's actually very light, so I'm just going to leave a bit of white paper there. But the darkest shadows are already there, we don't need to worry about those. But again, like I said with your drawing, keep moving your pencil in the direction of the petals. The way your plant's growing. So whatever plant you're doing, whether you're a tree or a flower or whatever, just draw it in the direction it's growing and it's going to look a lot more natural. Oh, it's a very nice match, this pink, for the flower, but then again, if you don't have one the exact same pink, really don't worry about it, because again, whoever's looking at your drawing later on is not going to have this cyclamen sat in front of them. It's quite light in places on this one, so I'm going to leave one or two little areas of white paper. Like I said, there's a tiny bit of pink in that stem, so let's get that in there. And then go to the red. It doesn't come too far up, it comes to about here somewhere. And that's just going to make all the difference, because it's really what makes these cyclamen quite distinctive, is this red colouring, or the darker colouring in the base. And then the green, got a tiny touch of green in the stem there. And for the leaf. Okay, so I'm hoping that this has been useful to you. Like I say, I hope I've not lost too much of this video in the middle there. If I have, I do apologise, and I'll put some notes over the top of where I've lost things to let you know what I was talking about. Fingers crossed I haven't lost anything at all. But with all your flower drawings, as with anything else really, it's all about observation. Like I said, get that plant and have a good look at it before you start. Look at the distinctive shapes of the leaves, whichever variety of plant that you're choosing to do. So perhaps you could, just gone over the line there, perhaps you could start by doing something like this with one, and then move on, after you've finished that, move on to doing the whole plant, putting more together. And you could start now, you could even do it on the same page if you wanted to put some extra ones behind, perhaps with a little less detail behind, make a focal point of one in the foreground and put some fading away. You could even just do a very abstract background of, you know, put some colours in the background to make it appear that there's some more pink behind there, some more flowers in the distance. Or go on and do a whole new drawing on another piece of paper with the whole thing. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know how you get on with your own flower drawings, and if you want me to do any specific flower, just pop that in the comments below and I'll do that as soon as I get time. Okay, thank you for watching, and bye for now.